So I have a story to share real quick. So a few years ago, I decided to review the movie Trick or Treat, and for that review, I created a satirical talk show called Late Night with Boone and O'Brien. The idea was that I would play this obnoxious talk show host who interviews famous movie serial killers. So in that particular segment, I interviewed Sam from Trick or Treat, and let's just say it wasn't one of my better ideas, although I did enjoy getting strangled by Sam in that skit. So yeah, it was just a funny memory I had while watching Late Night with the Devil. Anyway guys, welcome to yet another episode of Round the Clock Frights. My name is Josh, and today I'm going to be talking about Late Night with the Devil, and contrary to popular belief, I will not be talking about Jimmy Kimmel. But yes, I was looking up some of the more anticipated horror movies of 2024, and this one stood out because it had kind of an intriguing premise, the idea of a horror film that centers around a 1970s talk show. That sounded very interesting to me. I read that it was about a desperate talk show host who invites this possessed little girl onto his show for ratings, and I just gotta say this, I am sick to death of possession films. Last year's The Exorcist Believer, it really angered me to my core, and it just made me feel so sick that I almost vomited pea soup. So that was kind of the last straw, so I made an oath to myself. I said, self, you are not going to watch another possession film unless it has a really unique premise. So yeah, I mean, according to numerous critics, this film, Late Night with the Devil, did have a very fresh take on demonic possession, and I'm also a sucker for films that take place in the 1970s, so you know, that and the near-perfect Rotten Tomatoes score, all those things got me really excited. So I ended up driving over an hour to see this movie because I work as a manager at a movie theater. I won't name the chain that I work at, but I can see, movies for free whenever I want, so there was one location that was playing this movie, and I really wanted to see it, so I ended up driving over an hour to see this film, and was it worth it? Overall, I was pretty pleased with Late Night with the Devil. I wouldn't say this is necessarily a great horror film, but it is a very entertaining, decent horror film. Although, when I got to the theater, there was this couple sitting behind me, and I don't think the guy's date was particularly happy about this movie because she actually ran out of the theater at the very end, leaving him behind. So, yeah, maybe not the best movie to take a first date on, unless they're really into horror films like this, but it is a really entertaining horror film that masterfully recreates the era in which it takes place in. So before I gush about the technical aspects of this film, I should probably go over the general plot. Jack Delroy is a Johnny Carson wannabe who becomes moderately popular in the 1970s, but his show's popularity decreases over the years, so he ends up doing some pretty outlandish things in order to get more views. The film's first few minutes play out like a documentary. We see archive footage of past shows, including a bit where the titular TV host arm wrestles a little person. Just weird, bizarre stuff like that. We learn about his rise to fame and the controversy surrounding his celebrity status. We also learn that he had a wife who died of a sudden terminal disease, which causes him to become trapped in a big creative slump. One year, he gets the idea to interview a supposedly possessed girl during his annual Halloween special, where he hopes to actually speak with the devil. He also invites a skeptical paranormal investigator and a psychic who can apparently communicate with the dead. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this film does a masterful job of recreating the 1970s. I actually read an interview where the directors basically had to school their camera crew on how to make the film look very uncinematic. They wanted it to look like an actual talk show from the 70s, so there's no flashy camera work, it's all very straightforward and basic. A lot of over-the-shoulder shots, a lot of close-ups, but and also this was a really nice touch. There were times where the cameramen didn't really know what to focus on, so they would just be jerking the camera around all over the place, which was a nice touch. It made it feel much more authentic and legitimate. And there's just so many things they do to make it feel like an actual talk show from the 70s. I mean, the jazzy background music, the annoying one-liners, the unscripted arguments between guests, the random sponsor ads, like, now let's take a break to hear from our sponsors, blah, blah, blah.
Fighting the Frizzies at 11.
So this film stars a rather popular character actor by the name of David Dastmalchian. He's been in a lot of stuff. He was freaking Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad. He was one of the Joker's henchmen in The Dark Knight, which is where, I first discovered him. But he is a really talented actor, and he adds so much to the character of Jack Delroy. His desperation for fame, his charismatic screen presence, even his sketchy personal life. They establish the fact that he may or may not have been involved in this all-male cult, this cult that performs very bizarre rituals in hopes of gaining success. So, yeah, it makes for a very interesting character to watch, and he is just so much fun to watch in this movie. He's an actor who can take, a nothing character, a side character who would otherwise be forgettable, and make it very memorable. I mean, he's just that good of an actor. I also really liked the commentary in this film. It shows how celebrities will do pretty much anything to gain fame and fortune. He brings this little girl onto his show, this little girl who has lived through this very, very traumatic event, and it just shows how the media exploits, tragic events in order to gain the attention of curious viewers. Even going so far as to reshape certain narratives for better on-screen drama. It's a very well-written film, and I also like how it keeps the audience guessing. Both the real-life audience and the audience featured in the movie. The skeptic character, who by the way is also very entertaining in this movie, he has some rational explanations for most of the scary stuff that happens. He even goes so far as to show how the show's production crew possibly created some of the more fantastical bits. Oh, and by the way, there's going to be some moderate spoilers from here on out because I have to talk about my favorite sequence in the film. There's a very eerie scene where the skeptic character uses hypnosis on David Dastmalchian's sidekick. And it's this very bizarre, disgusting scene where, let's just say the sidekick begins to see things, some very gross, disgusting things, and it's just such a nerve-wracking sequence, and it's just so disgusting. And honestly, there's some really good humor in this film. There's another character who's this John Edward type psychic, this obvious fraud, and there's this great sequence where, he's talking to the audience and he's using all these, psychic tricks on them. He's basically doing things like, I sense a P, is there a Peter or like a Peterson in the audience? He does stuff like that. And it's actually quite humorous. It pokes fun at the notion of being able to communicate with the dead.
Does your name begin with an A? No. A B? No. C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P? Peter! My name's Peter! Is your name Peter? Wow, you are some kind of sorcerer.
Okay, so some more minor spoilers. There are some more things I disliked about this film. There are some pretty obvious payoffs in this movie. Events you can see coming if you pay attention, early on in the film. Like I mentioned earlier, he has a dead wife, and we also find out that he was involved in the satanic cult, so put two and two together. How do you think those two events are related? There's also lines that describe what happened later in the film. A character will say to another character, "Oh, don't worry, this show will really make your head spin." So just very obvious writing like that. And in a movie like this, there's obviously going to be a very violent, over-the-top ending. Most of the film is a slow burn, and you can tell it's building towards something really horrific, and it does. We do see some pretty gross, nightmarish stuff occur, but stuff that's pretty typical in a film like this. But honestly, I do admire this film for taking its time, Scary things do happen, Scary things do happen in the first half of this film, but they're not as big and bombastic, and it definitely takes its time, which I appreciate. Some audiences may not like that, they may think the first half is too slow and uneventful, but I appreciated how it took its time, and it does lead to a very grand, bombastic finale, so at least there's that. Also, I've been reading some articles about this movie. Apparently, there's been some controversy surrounding this movie about its use of artificial intelligence. Apparently, the director decided to experiment with artificial intelligence. So there are 3 images in the film that were created using AI. These transitional cards, the types of cards you would see on talk shows like "we'll be right back" or "after these messages," stuff like that. And yeah, I agree, it feels really unnecessary and cheap to do something like this. It also feels very lazy. You easily could have hired real artists to come in and make old school transitional cards for this fictional television broadcast. So yeah, I don't really agree with this director's standpoint. It's only 3 images in the film. Is it really that big of a deal? Yeah, honestly, it is. It feels pretty lazy, like I said. But overall, I had a pretty good time watching Late Night with the Devil. I appreciated the director's commitment to creating a convincing 1970s aesthetic, you know, minus the moderate use of AI technology, but David Dastmalchian's excellent performance really elevated the film. But yeah, I would say it's definitely worth a watch, especially given the other horror films I've watched so far this year, like Night Swim, which was just relentlessly terrible. I don't think it's worth driving an hour to see. I don't think it's worth that much traveling, but you know, it's going to hit streaming here pretty soon. I think it's going to hit streaming sometime in April. So, you know, if you're subscribed to the streaming service Shudder, definitely check it out, guys. It's definitely worth a watch. But yes, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of 2024's Late Night with the Devil. So, this week, I'm going to be seeing Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Oh, bother. I am not looking forward to that at all, but you know what? It could end up being a good time. I mean, you never know. It could be an entertainingly bad horror film, although I just couldn't stand the first Winnie the Pooh horror movie. I'm just so tired of that trend in general. This trend of taking, you know, classic children's characters and turning them into slasher films, I'm just so sick of it all. Anyway, getting off topic. Thank you so much again, guys. If you liked what you saw here, please subscribe to my channel, Round the Clock Frights, for more horrific content. Have a very scary day, boils and ghouls, and whatever you do, don't watch Night Owls with Jack Delroy, you know, the talk show of this film. You'll probably end up inviting the devil into your house, which I don't think you want. Not at all. Anyway, guys, take care. Thank you so much again.